pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Supervisor Locke with the invocation.
We remember to thank our Creator for all that we are and all that we have. Please help to guide us through the tough decisions we have to make this evening. Merry Christmas and Happy New Year to all. Amen.
Amen. Supervisor Robel.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'll move for the adoption of this evening's agenda.
It's been moved and seconded. All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Carried. Is there anybody from the public that would like to speak on anything on the agenda this evening? Now is your chance to talk. Is there anybody from the public that would like to speak on anything on the agenda this evening? Now is your chance to talk. Okay, that portion of the meeting will be closed. Communications and petitions, zoning amendments from the clerk.
We have a few notices of claim this evening. One comes from Crail Camp Trucking for damage to a tarp done at the landfill, referred to Personnel and Finance. We have a notice of claim for injuries sustained by Mr. Melichek. It was an accident out at the Solid Waste Recycling Transfer Station, and that is referred to the Personnel and Finance Committee. We have a number of resolutions from other counties. The first one comes from Taylor County. It's a resolution requiring creation of a new nonpartisan procedure for the preparation of legislative and congressional redistricting plans, referred to the Legislative Committee. And we have a number of resolutions from Outagamie County. One of them is dealing with supporting legislation that would update the state criminal law and state regulatory provisions concerning prescription drugs and controlled substances, referred to the Legislative Committee. Another from resolution from Outagamie County supports legislation allowing all levels of EMTs and first responders to be trained to administer naloxone, referred to Legislative Committee. Another from Outagamie County supporting legislation that would require individuals to show proper identification when picking up Schedule 2 or Schedule 3 narcotics, referred to the Legislative Committee. And another Outagamie County resolution supporting legislation that would allow or have a person not be prosecuted for possessing naloxone or for administering or delivering naloxone to another person if he or she believes that the person is suffering from an overdose or adverse reaction to a controlled substance, referred to the Legislative Committee. And then there's a petition for zoning amendment from Martin Finn in the town of Nakaimai requesting a zoning change from A2, B3 to I1 for farming and outdoor recreation, referred to planning and zoning. That's all.
Okay. Reports from committees, commissions, and boards. Supervisor Egan.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. On everyone's desk tonight, I laid a copy from Phillips Tax and Accounting Incorporated of the Winnebago County Fair Association's year-end, which ended November 30th. It's there for you to look at. I will be giving a presentation to the Ag and Extension Committee on Thursday morning at approximately 9 o'clock out at the Coughlin Building. Anyone wishing to come to that to hear more or ask questions, or if they'd like to call me and ask questions on it, won't take up a lot of time. We did make a few $100s this year, so first time in quite a while we turned out in the black, and a lot of that was because we sold calendars, which we have again for sale this year for $20. A winner every day. Thank you.
Okay. Supervisor Haig.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. First of all, it's with a heavy heart I'd like to report to the board the passing of Mike Milo Jovanovich, who was the treasurer of the Tri-County Rec Association. I have a letter from Nancy Hacker, General Manager, Tri-County Ice Arena, It is with a very heavy heart that I report to you this morning the passing. This is from the 14th of Mike Jovanovich, Treasurer of the Tri-County Rec Association Board of Directors. Mike's dedication to the staff and user groups of the arena has been unwavering for almost 20 years. His kindness, friendly smile, and outgoing personality will be missed greatly. Mike, rest in peace. And secondly, in regards to our budget meeting, I think we all received a copy of an email from Doug Church, Director of Communications, National Air Traffic Controllers Association. And I think specifically Mr. Chairman and County Executive Harris received this. This was a response to one of the questions that was directed towards the airport director, and the response was, the NATCA watched your appearance on October 30th, 2013 at the Winnebago County budget meeting. While we appreciate the support you gave to funding an adequate air conditioning system in the airport control tower, your comments about FAA air traffic controllers in the tower working the EAA AirVenture event are completely false. There is no language in our collective bargaining agreements with the FAA allowing for controllers to leave position in the tower due to lack of adequate air conditioning. Air traffic controllers at the AirVenture event, like all controllers nationwide in all facilities, take enormous pride in their extreme commitment to both safety and professionalism. They are deeply devoted to their profession and get the job done safely and effectively, no matter the challenges that may be involved. You can and should take great pride in the work of controllers at OSH during AirVenture. Sincerely, Doug Church, Director of Communications, National Air Traffic Controllers Association, Washington, D.C. Thank you.
Thank you. Supervisor Brennan.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. For the legislative committee members, there is no meeting this month if you missed it at the last meeting. However, there should be a document that was handed out on your desk in regards to the questions that were raised to Assemblywoman Bernard Shaber. She did provide me with this document, and I thought it would be good to distribute it well ahead of time when you don't have anything better to do during the holidays and can study it wholeheartedly and thoroughly. This is basically for the legislative committee members, so if you are interested, I can have the clerk get you that information about the sales tax data. So.
Okay, thank you. Approval of proceedings from October 28th, 29th, and 30th. It's been moved and seconded. I have to make a correction. On the book for the proceedings from October 20, the yellow one, 28th, 29th, and 30th, on page 209 and 216, it says Resolution 227. That number should be corrected to 277 on both those pages. Should be 277 rather than Resolution 227 on page 209, and I believe 216 is the last page. With that being corrected, all in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Oppose? Carried. County Executives Report.
Before you on the agenda, you have resolution 261-92073, which is approving the Winnebago County Human Resource Policy Manual. That's the culmination of a lot of work and an awful lot of
Keep talking louder.
awful lot of give and take between myself and the P&F committee. It was my instincts to make as few changes as possible in the details of the existing contracts and to leave those changes for a future date when we determine which labor unions remain. But the P&F committee's instincts were to try and seek uniformity across all the employee groups as much as possible. So there was a great deal of give and take and a lot of compromise to reach this handbook. I believe there'll be an amendment offered tonight to clean up some language with regard to floating holidays. I would recommend approval of the whole handbook. If, however, the board should get hung up on some part of the handbook, the timing here is becoming critical. And with regard to the freezing of the accumulation of sick days for payout at retirement, it's kind of critical that that pass prior to year end, because we're attempting to freeze the accumulation of those days for payout as of year end for the represented employees in the same fashion that we froze those for the non-represented employees way back in 2005. And you really can't freeze it as of a pass date, so it's kind of critical that at least that portion get through tonight, and it would be my recommendation that the entire handbook be passed tonight, together with the amendment that I expect you will see with regard to floating holidays. And that's all I have in my report.
That amendment's not so much an amendment, it's that it was omitted from there. But the Personnel and Finance did approve it, and I believe that Mr. Rowe will correct that when it comes forward to the board floor.
And then I have some appointments tonight. I have some reappointments to the Human Service Board, subject to the County Board approval. The appointments are Donna Laurie, Ronald Keel, and Robert Patterson.
The correction of the spelling for Pat, it should be Patterson, so we're correcting that.
Okay.
All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Carried.
I have some reappointments to the Local Emergency Planning Commission. And tonight I'm having trouble. I'm going to use my glasses. Barty Omaru, Frank Bell, and Gordy Ledoy.
It's been moved and seconded. All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Carried.
I have 3 appointments or reappointments to the Winnefox Library System Board of Trustee. Carol Kodner, Alex Hummel, and Christine Kopp.
It's been moved and seconded. All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Carried.
Thank you.
Thank you. Well, I called, but I couldn't find her. Somebody said Mrs. Mr. Thompson. Supervisor Thompson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I had hoped to address this question to the county executive while he was up in front, and perhaps it should have been directed to the entire board as well. I don't know if this is the appropriate time nor the appropriate place to bring it, but I've had some concerns expressed to me by a number of people concerning the flaring off of the gas out at the landfill. I know that the question is much more complex than many people realize it is. It's probably more complex than I realize it is. But I also am aware that we are using some gas, at least I have the impression that we are using some. And I also have the feeling that sometimes when we make a couple of investigations as to the possibility of using that gas, the answer is no, but perhaps further investigation might find some leads that we haven't been able to follow. At least this county board member would like to see some kind of an organized way of getting out proposals for anybody who can use that gas, or perhaps finding a way that the county can. It may not be feasible,
Just a minute.
but we
Mr.
may have
Farley,
given
your
up.
bill must be up to about $200 by now.
I'm sorry?
Mr. Farley's phone rings constantly.
No, I didn't hear the comment, but that's probably better. But in any case, I wonder if a little bit more investigation, or quite a bit more investigation, might possibly yield some way that can be used. Even if we would come out easy, perhaps we could license someone else to use that. Even if we make no profit at all, it certainly is the right thing to do. So I just expressed that opinion, and I hope that perhaps the county board executive or some other appropriate committee could take a harder look at it than we have before. Thank you.
We are in process of addressing that. I plan on having them come to our meeting on the 7th of January, and we can ask them that question then. But a lot of times there's engines that fail, and then when the engines fail, they have to flare the gas off more than normal. Yeah. But that's one of the main reasons, because of the problems they have with some of the engines periodically.
I'm very glad to hear that, and I thank you for that, Dave.
But we are, matter of fact, Julie has a note. She's going to be contacting them, or already has, to give a presentation on the 7th of January.
Yeah. Thank you so much. I know it bothers a lot of people, and I think we'll feel better if it's taken care of as well as we can.
Supervisor Robel questions it all the time at our solid waste meetings also. Executive?
Well, that means two of us then.
If I can offer just 2 minutes of explanation, too. Part of the situation is that when you want to add an additional generator, you have to get, Part of the problem is when you want to add an additional generator, you have to get air permits. It takes about a year to obtain the proper approvals to situate a new generator. We do have several generators out at the landfill site, and 2 additional ones at the sheriff's office jail. And ideally, we'd like to balance it off so that the gas produced closely matches what we're burning. But a couple things to consider. One is that we're starting to seal off that landfill so that the amount of gas produced may die off over time. And a second issue that's relevant is there's a recycling system within the landfill. We can control how much of the leachate, the moisture coming out of the landfill, how much of that goes to a sewage treatment plant, and how much is retained. And then we have hydraulic systems within the landfill that will allow us to recirculate some of that moisture. And, we've recently been experimenting with how much cycle time and how much of that moisture should be put back up into the top of the landfill. And I think we've discovered that it really picks up the production of gas when you recycle the liquid, and we probably would not spend as much time pumping that liquid back up into the landfill going forward. So we do hope to have a little better balance in how much gas is produced and how much we're converting to electricity. But we would really like to use that gas for our own purposes, producing electricity and selling it back to the grid.
Thank you.
Thank you.
The appointment for District 6 has been pulled, but we have somebody new again coming on, so we hope at the next meeting we'll have another individual to be appointed. So that's all I have to report. I just want to say Supervisor Barker supposedly has been told that, or I've been told that she fell again and hurt herself, so I don't know to what degree, but maybe Susan Locke knows more than you don't.
After she fell and broke her ankle, then she fell again, but she's okay. She was out and about.
Okay.
Why she's not here?
The what? Okay. There was a change in our book. Some of the meetings say the February 11th meeting, the April 15th and April 22nd. Those will be the new dates. February 11th, 2014 will be the business meeting. April 15th and April 22nd. With the elections, and that's what there's a difference in. Right, Sue says she'll be passing it out so that you have it. That's all that I have. Zoning reports and ordinances. Supervisor Brennan.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would move for the acceptance of report number 1.
It's been moved and seconded to accept report number 1. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Oppose? Carried.
I would move for the adoption of a mandatory ordinance number 1.
It's been moved and seconded to accept the mandatory ordinance of number 1. All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Oppose? Carried. A mandatory ordinance number 2, Town of Clayton, amend the zoning ordinance of the Town of Clayton. Supervisor Fari.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I move for approval of amendatory ordinance number 2.
It's been moved and seconded. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Oppose? Carried. A mandatory ordinance number 3, Town of Clayton, on behalf of Robert Lemke for the zoning change to A2 for tax parcel number 006-04-05-01. Supervisor Fari.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Move for approval for amendatory ordinance number 3.
It's been moved and seconded. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Oppose? Carried. A mandatory ordinance number 4, Town of Clayton, on behalf of Christopher Clausen for zoning change to P1 for tax parcel number 006-05-35-03. Supervisor Fari.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I move for amendatory ordinance number 4.
It's been moved and seconded to accept the mandatory ordinance number 4. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Oppose? Carried. A mandatory ordinance number 5, Town of Clayton, on behalf of Donald Castle and Robert Janice Williamson for zoning change to A1 to R1 for tax parcel number 06-0823, 006-082303. Supervisor Fari.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I move for approval of amendatory ordinance number 5 from the Town of Clayton.
It's been moved and seconded. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Oppose? Carried. A mandatory ordinance number 6, Town of Clayton, on behalf of Scott Cito for zoning changes from R1 to parcel number 006-1242. Supervisor Fari.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. That is Supervisory 36 District. Would you like me to represent Clayton?
Sure, go ahead.
Okay. I'll move for approval of amendatory ordinance number 6.
Been moved and seconded. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Carried. A mandatory ordinance number 7, Town of Clayton, on behalf of Daniel Olson for zoning changes from R1 to tax parcel number 006-0186. Supervisor Fari.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Move for approval of amendatory ordinance number 7 on behalf of Town of Clayton.
It's been moved and seconded. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
A mandatory ordinance number 8, Town of Wolf River. Would this be Mr. Crusher? Town of Wolf River, amend the zoning map to the Town of Wolf River in accordance with the petition of owners requesting zoning changes of multiple parcels as listed below. There's too many to list, but go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I move for approval of mandatory ordinance number 8 for the Town of Wolf River.
Been moved and seconded. All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Supervisor Haig.
I saw a note on the second page there. What was the note on the bottom? Forward to County Board for approval. It says 401 Gabbert. Is that significant in any way, shape, or form?
Not present. So that's why the 4, 0, and then the 1, that would have been her.
Thank you.
Opposed? Carried. Resolution number 261-92013, approving Winnebago County Human Resource Policy Manual. Supervisor Rule.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would move for approval of Resolution 261-92013.
Second.
And if I may, direct you to the document that you had on your desk this evening. Those items were discussed, were voted on at the last PNF meeting, but were not included in the copy that you folks all received in your packet. It doesn't change anything significant in the way of monies. In fact, it gets things back to where they were. Also, you can see there were two places where they talked about Good Friday and the Friday before Easter. We're now going to call them both the Friday before Easter. With those distinctions, I would hope we'd pass this.
Okay. Supervisor Farley.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. First of all, let me start by apologizing. If we go back to September, I had raised the issue about the employee possession of weapons. This is identified as 7.07 in this document. I did receive a letter in October requesting more input, and I apologize. I did not respond to that. However, as I sit here tonight and I am asked to vote on this, I continue to have concerns about how that is written. We basically have a fairly new state law. I think there's continuing issues that need to be addressed. So if I might offer a amendment to the motion to approve, I would ask that section 7.07 be separated from this document and brought forward as a separate policy. Thank you. It's not my intention to hold up I have no concerns with the other language in the document. Obviously, there's been a lot of work put into it. I appreciate that. But this particular part of it, I think, needs a little more work.
Would you say the number again, the section?
7.07, employee possession of weapons.
Page 12.
Page 12, thank you. And I would say that if we don't pass that tonight, this is not going to be an issue that's detrimental because we have our current policy in place, et cetera. There's current state laws governing this. It's just that I'd like to see, I'm concerned about a liability issue here, so I would ask you to support that, please, and we can get this done tonight.
Mr. Collier, is that something that we can work on later, or how is that in there? Would you step up to the...
Well, no, I would agree that could be discussed later. I don't have any objection to doing that. The rest of the manual as a body, if that's passed tonight, we can bring it back. Or the other alternative would be to pass it as is, and it can come back for revisions of the weapons policy if we discover that there are some other concerns we didn't take into account. Either way.
Is that okay with you, Mr. Farley? I mean, if they bring it...
I appreciate, and I think thank you for your comments, but I think it's best to separate it and have a separate policy. So I reiterate my motion.
Okay.
It might be more difficult to bring it back with another resolution to amend and that kind of stuff.
Okay. And there was a second, right? And Supervisor Eisen on the amendment?
No.
Supervisor Haig on the amendment? Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. In regards to the narrative in 707, it's my understanding, and since the Human Resources Director is here, maybe he could respond, and if the insurance carrier, liability insurance carrier for Winnebago County understands the narrative in 707, my understanding in having a couple different conversations is there's the potential here of having some type of a screening, a weapons screening at the door of county office buildings or other facilities in regards to liability if we would pass this strict of a language regarding employees. So that's my question specifically tonight, but I'm sure that Mr. Fari has others here as well.
If I might.
Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. In order to clarify, I did call. Our insurance carrier is Wisconsin Mutual. They cover us for liability issues. I did call and request to speak to a Karen Flynn. She was not available, and I called this morning about 9 o'clock, I think. And then I left a message for Jackie Zarnoth, and unfortunately she did not get back to me either. But if we give the benefit, I can share this with you, with the pleasure of the chairman. The town of Vinland passed a ordinance, or basically a stipulation saying a policy that you cannot have a weapon in the town hall. And we put the signs up, which is required under state law. Then we notified our insurance company that we had done this, and we got a response from them, and it was quite clear that if we took that action, then we assumed the liability for taking that action. So that is the question here. We did not put up screening and all that kind of stuff, but our insurance company thought there was a consequence to it, and that was the liability issue. And I'd like to have that clarified before we adopt this policy. So that's the reason behind it, with a little background behind that also.
Go ahead, Mr. Bodner.
The towns are quite different than the county. County is a political subdivision of the state. And there's a specific statute, I believe it's 941.235, subsection 1, which states that it's a Class A misdemeanor to carry a firearm in any building that is owned or leased by the state or any political subdivision thereof. And we're a political subdivision of the state. So the town is not, but the county is. So if somebody, for example, brought a weapon into the Parks building, that would be a Class A misdemeanor. Absolutely.
And what was
no,
that?
941.235. I'm surprised that you didn't call me and ask me, Mr. Fari, because I could have given you that answer.
Well,
rather than calling people that aren't attorneys in the Wisconsin County Mutual Insurance Company, I could have given you the answer within 10 minutes.
Well, I appreciate that, but my thought was to call the insurance company just like we had issues with the town.
And I just want to indicate to you, when the concealed carry law went into effect, I did talk to the county insurance company about this, and they did not share the same opinion as the town's insurance company did with regard to it. They do not feel that it creates any more liability on the county. Plus, you have a state law that makes it a crime to carry a firearm into a building that's owned by the state or leased by the state or a political subdivision thereof.
Which the county would be.
Which the county would be. So if you have a weapon on you right now, you may want to take it outside.
Well, I think we all know you're not supposed to carry them in a courthouse, obviously.
Right. But it goes for other buildings such as Parkview
And I'm not
House.
speaking about me personally, sir. I'm speaking about the rights of the people under the new law.
Yeah. Well, you don't have a right. You don't have a right to do it. And in fact, you'll get in trouble if you do it.
Supervisor Haig.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Subsection A of this 707 indicates that the parking lot, the vehicle in a parking lot is also off limits to storing, quote unquote, a dangerous weapon. Could you clarify that as well, Mr. Bodner?
In the handbook, under A, under 7.7 on page 12.
Says an employee may carry or store a dangerous weapon in the employee's personal vehicle, regardless of whether the vehicle is used in course of employment or whether the vehicle is driven or parked on property owned or utilized by the county. An employee may not possess a dangerous weapon in a county vehicle unless it is allowed under policy 707.B. You're free to, the county is free to basically pass a policy with regard to the storage or use of weapons within their own vehicles. We cannot do that with regard to your people's personal vehicles. So if your car's out in the parking lot and you have a rifle out there right now, we can't prohibit you from having the rifle there if you have a license to do that.
So a rifle is considered a dangerous weapon. What else is considered a dangerous weapon?
Firearm. It says dangerous weapon, but it's really referring to firearms. If you want to amend it to say firearms, that's fine, but that's, and pardon me, Mike, it's in the definitions, right?
Yeah, concealed carry law, I happen to have a copy with me, 939.22 section 10 is the definition of dangerous weapon that's in the concealed carry law. So it means a firearm, whether loaded or unloaded, or another device that's designed as a weapon and capable of producing death or great bodily harm, etc.
Supervisor Smith.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have a question on this. If somebody, okay, we have it posted that weapons are not allowed. Somebody violating that law, bringing a weapon in, discharging it, and injuring or killing someone, would the county have a liability in that case?
Anybody can be sued for just about anything. Whether the lawsuit would be allowed to go forward by the court is, in my opinion, is pretty doubtful because, again, it's a criminal act. It's a crime.
Yeah.
I mean, if you're basically letting people walk around with weapons hanging out and you know they're doing that and it's a crime, there could be liability for that. But there's not necessarily a requirement that everybody be searched that comes into the courthouse or a public building.
Because that seems to be a debatable area.
But it's already the law that,
Yeah.
I mean, if you you cannot bring a weapon, for example, into this courthouse tonight.
That's correct.
And by weapon, I mean a firearm.
Yeah.
You know, if you brought a cake knife in and later stabbed somebody with it, that's a little bit different story.
Supervisor Egan.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just have a question then. I know we've got one for sure. I don't know if we've got any more than that. We have judges here that carry firearms. Pack them right on their sides and under the robe and everything else. What gives them the right?
The state law does. State law provides that people that are in law enforcement, that there's an exception for them. So the sheriff's department, police, district attorney, et cetera, have a right to carry a firearm.
Okay, thank you.
Supervisor Thompson.
Thank you. I have another question. I noticed in this policy that if a person carries a firearm in his car, that's okay in the parking lot, but it also said when they're doing county business with their own cars, they can still have that firearm in their car. Is there a possibility that we have any liabilities there since a person would be carrying a firearm in his vehicle while he is doing county business? That appears to me to be a bit of a problem.
It's a state law that allows them to do that.
Even as they're doing county business?
It's their car. They're allowed to do that if it's in their own car. I mean, the state law is very specific with regard to this, Claude.
Good. I'm glad it's a state law because otherwise I was wondering if it could cause us problems.
I mean, the other issue...
Apparently it can.
The other issue is there's a distinction between what's a basically an intentional tort and one that's one of negligence or recklessness. You know, if you decide to beat up somebody or kill them, there's less likelihood that the county is going to be liable because that's an intentional tort unless there was some notice of that to the county that, for example, you came in and said, I'm going to get in my car and go and shoot somebody tonight. I mean, if you just happen to do it and there's no notice to the county, it's very unlikely that the county can be held liable for that because it's an intentional tort.
Thank you.
I know of individuals that go turkey hunting and quick come racing down to the county property and then get involved in a meeting. Okay, we'll vote by machine, or we'll vote. We have to all re-punch in because it's got, I shut it down before inadvertently, so we'll push. We are, first of all, we're relocating. You have to re-punch in. First, you're going to re-punch in, and then we're going to vote on that issue. We're going to, oh, that's right. Well, after all that commotion, what is you still want to follow through with your amendment, Mr. Fari? Yes, I do. Okay. Susan Locke. Okay, and Mr. Fari, your Sue, do you have his, what he had said, that he wanted to remove that segment? So you want to remove 70, complete 707 till a different, you want to bring it forward as a separate policy? Okay? Does everybody understand? Okay, vote aye if you want to bring it forward as a separate policy. Vote no if you don't. Tim, tell her how you voted, aye or no. Can you bring it back without a... Maybe it needs a battery. So you can't change your vote once you start to vote? I want to change my vote to no. So what do you do for me? If it's a big deal, leave it like it is. Leave it. Just leave it. That has failed. Now back to the original resolution. If there are no other questions, we'll vote aye if you approve it, the handbook. Vote no if you don't. Mr. Eisen.
I had requested to address the board on that issue of the handbook. And my speaking opportunity was interrupted by the amendment, and I wish to continue with the question that I had.
Okay, I can re-vote on it, can I? If I...
He doesn't want to speak on the amendment.
On the what?
He wants to speak on the main motion.
Well, I understand. Oh, I thought he was saying he wanted to speak on the... Okay, go ahead, Mr. Eisen.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would like to ask the Human Services, the Human Resources Director to explain to the board what these exceptions, or how we came about with these exceptions to page 34, vacations, page 36, holidays, page 38, floating holidays. There is a basic policy in respect to the majority of the employees, but there are exceptions in respect to particular departments. Could you explain to the board and to it appears that with the amendment that is going to be voted, is this all voted as one document? Okay, then there's been quite a bit of discussion in committee in respect to this. Could you share more of the details with the board and with the public so that we could better understand the route that you're taking this for the present time? I do understand it's a temporary measure until union statuses and other details are ironed out.
Well, I suppose everything is temporary in that everything is subject to change and nothing is permanent in this life.
Thank you. Yeah.
And I think that's a good rule to follow. But I'd be glad to explain a little bit more about our process of thinking with respect to those benefit policies. You know, certainly the original draft submitted to the board in September had completely separate policies on these employee benefit issues because we do have a wide range of different rules in the different union contracts. So we have 7 unions and 2 non-union groups that sometimes have different rules. So we're trying to respect those differences and keep them the same until a later time after perhaps the union clarification might, union situation might be a little more clear and we might want to make some further changes after evaluating them after some time. But the committee wanted to have more uniformity as much as was possible now rather than later, and so we went that route. And that's really the major change proposed here compared to September's version. And those policies you referred to were very much a part of that along with some others. If we look at the vacation policy, for instance, what I did to try to come up with a uniform vacation policy is I actually diagrammed out each one of 9 different groups of employees and how many days vacation they get after so many years and add it all up and do the math and presented that calculation in the spreadsheet to the committee. And it turned out that the non-union vacation plan overall was pretty close to what most of the unions had and very close to the average of what all the unions had in terms of over a 30-year career, how much vacation you'd get. The one real difference was vacation in excess of 5 weeks was available to some unions, going up to 30 days or 6 weeks of vacation for a full-time employee. Frankly, I thought that was a little over-generous in that very few other employers would offer more than 5 weeks of vacation. So what we decided to do was essentially use, for most purposes, the non-union plan, which is very close to the average already, and then cut it off after 5 weeks to make that the maximum, which is still a generous maximum. But then kind of red circle employees who are already above that 5-week maximum, so we wouldn't be taking something away from them. So that's the general philosophy of the current vacation policy. There are some exceptions. We do have one thing about county government. I talk every day to employees who tell me their particular job is unique, and they're generally right because we have an amazingly diverse group of jobs that county government has to do. And so sometimes the general rule doesn't always exactly work. So for instance, the first one I see under vacation benefits, there are some different rules for Parkview employees. While there are actually some different vacation rules at Parkview, they have a lot more scheduling concerns than most. And the benefit time there is more costly because it often has to be replaced by overtime, which the nursing home business is very difficult to keep to a reasonable budget, so we have to pay close attention to the cost of that. And then we have an exception for highway department employees. Surprisingly, there are sometimes near the end of the year when the highway department gets pretty busy, as we can see by looking outside. And with the normal vacation policy calling for vacation to be used up by the end of the year, there's usually a lot of vacation taken by most employees in December, way higher than average. That doesn't work for the highway department because they get a big snowstorm and everyone's on vacation. We're going to be sliding home ourselves. And so they do vacation on an anniversary date basis. So it doesn't all come at the end of the year. And we didn't want to change that rule to make it uniform because we'd still have that problem with the highway department. So that's why we made certain exceptions for things like that because of operational needs. Another special rule for bridge tenders, they have a completely different kind of vacation schedule. They don't get nearly as much vacation. They're essentially seasonal employees, although we treat them as regular employees. There are some different rules in the sheriff's office. We don't want to penalize people for getting promoted, and their employees, the deputies, do have full collective bargaining rights. So we want to make sure we have the ability to let the sergeants have the same kind of benefits as the deputies. As I said, we don't want to disincentivize people to look for a promotion. So that's what most of the exceptions are for things like that. You mentioned holidays on page 36. The regular holidays are pretty close to uniform under this policy, but the holidays, frankly, were the hardest thing, surprisingly, to make uniform because we had such a great variation. And drafts were proposed that made them uniform, and they just didn't work. We had a lot of adverse comment to them. To make the holidays uniform, we'd either have to give a lot more holidays at places like Parkview and some other departments, which would have ruined their budgets because of the scheduling problems, or we have to push everyone down, and then a lot of employees were very upset at that idea that they'd have fewer holidays. So that's why we really had to, despite our best efforts, we had to preserve some of the differences for different groups of employees on holidays, and especially floating holidays. So again, on regular holidays, the main difference is for Parkview. Now, for instance, if I were, I'm here as a non-union employee, and we get 10 regular holidays and 4 floating holidays, and the Parkview administrator is sitting a couple rows behind me. The Parkview non-union people get 7 regular holidays and 7 floating holidays. You may say it adds up to the same thing. What's the difference? That's what I thought at first too, but it really does make a difference to them because a regularly scheduled holiday still needs a full staff at Parkview, and so everyone's there earning extra time and a half for working on the holiday. The scheduling concerns are much greater for the regular holidays, whereas the floating holidays can be shifted to times where it's not so busy. You can afford to have more people off. So that's why there's a different breakdown for Parkview. Same total, but fewer recognized regular holidays.
So there are elements of morale in scheduling.
Absolutely, scheduling is a big part of it. All the exceptions really are based on specific operational concerns within a particular department or group of departments, I would say. I think that pretty much covers it. And it got even more complicated when you get into floating holidays and how those are allocated. And so we just really had to go back and preserve the amount of holidays that we had. Now, this draft does achieve some uniformity in the rules as to how they're administered and how they're scheduled to a certain degree. A lot of the general language is made the same, but those amounts and particular rules for operational concerns are still there.
At this point, I'd like to commend you for the effort that you put into this for the direction that the board had given you back in September. Thank you very much for your diligence.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
One quick question for the administrator. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. In regards to, I think you said there were 7 unions that comprise union employees. I guess the question is, does that include the Sheriff's Department, and are all 7 of those unions recertified? And if not, when do they vote for recertification?
Thank you. The number 7 unions does include the Sheriff's Department union. However, the Sheriff's Officers Union, the Deputies Union, is not affected by many of the provisions in this handbook, particularly the ones on benefits, because those are covered by their collective bargaining agreement still. So there's no exceptions that relate specifically to the deputies, for instance, the officers, because those are already covered by the manual. So there's general language early in the policy manual before you that says that in the event of a conflict between these rules and the collective bargaining agreement, the collective bargaining agreement still controls as long as it's a valid agreement under Wisconsin law. And then regarding recertification, as of right now, one of our other 6 unions that are not law enforcement has recertified and had a vote last spring of 2013, and that's the dispatchers unit. So that one has recertified. The other 5 have not recertified, but the Employment Relations Commission tells us that since they were prevented from recertifying by the existence of a federal court injunction, they're not holding that against them, so they're not considering them to be decertified either. Those unions will be subject, under the current legal status, to recertification votes in early 2014. And the timeline would be to recertify, those unions would have to file a petition by January 30th, next month. And if they don't file a petition, they will automatically become decertified. If they do file a petition, then an election would be held in March or April of 2014, and they would be recertified only if 51% of their members or more voted in favor of certification.
Thank you.
Okay. We will vote by machine and by our little pad. Vote aye if you approve, no if you disapprove. We did vote on the amendment. We're voting on the whole pack now. That is passed. Resolution number 282, 12/2013. Disallow claim of the town of Inland. You all set to go? Supervisor Rowe.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would move for the approval of Resolution 282-122-013.
Been moved and seconded. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Carried. Okay. Resolution, did you get that? One abstention. Resolution 283-12/2013, disallow claim of Christian M. Richards. Supervisor Rowe.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would move for the approval of Resolution 283-122-013.
Was moved and seconded. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Carried. Resolution 284-12/2013, appropriate $300,000 to the telephone system replacement project funding to come from Technology Replacement Fund. Supervisor Smith.
I would move for approval of Resolution 284-122013.
Was moved and seconded. Well, we'll vote by our little pad. Vote aye if you approve, no if you disapprove. Just to punch them out.
Anytime you need a
What does it need, 27?
I need a bet switch.
That is passed. Resolution 285-12-2013, transfer $115,000 to the miscellaneous unclassified cost center to cover cost overages in labor and other operating expense categories. Supervisor Rowe.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would move for the approval of Resolution 285-122-013.
Been moved and seconded. All in favor, Supervisor Haig.
Mr. Chairman, what is the benefit of moving this money from each department budget into the other operating expense budget?
We're talking about the portion that represents the payouts, correct?
Yes.
The issue with that is it's very difficult during budget time to predict who's going to retire and get a payout. And without having any sure way of knowing amounts, you're going to probably have departments that are going to end up over budgeting it because they don't want to be under budget. So by taking that out of there, we eliminate that issue of potential over budgeting, putting it in one place.
Thank you.
All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Carried. Resolution 286-12-2013. Authorize the finance director to write off old uncollectible accounts receivables. Supervisor Rowe.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would move for the acceptance of Resolution 286-122-013.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Carried. Resolution 287-12-2013, authorize granting a temporary limited easement to the town of Menasha while completion of grading work on Arena Drive near Tri-County Ice Arena. Supervisor Hamlin.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would move for the authorization of Resolution 287-122-013.
Second.
It was moved and seconded. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Carried. Resolution 288-12-2013, authorize 5-year cooperative service agreement between Winnebago County, Wisconsin Department of Natural Resources, WDNR, and United States Department of Agriculture, USDA, Animal Plant Health Inspection Service, Wildlife Services. Supervisor Farley.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'll move for approval of Resolution 288-12-2013. If there's any questions, Mr. Davies, our director, has been good enough to stay with us during the proceedings.
All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Carried. Resolution 289-12-2013, authorized 10-year lease agreement between Winnebago County and Limited Liability Corporation owned by Carl Butcher, Meg Unit, Open Space. Supervisor Hamlin.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would move for Resolution 289-122-013.
Been moved and seconded. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Carried. Supervisor Robel.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'll move that we adjourn until Tuesday, January 7th at 6 p.m. for a special order of business, and that's 2014.
Thank you. We are adjourned.